Drayton Manor is one of the UK's most prominent family theme parks, located just a short 25-minute drive from central Birmingham. The park is situated on 180 acres of land northeast of the city and offers 47 rides and attractions, including roller coasters and a 15-acre zoo. They originally got their start back in 1950, debuting with just simple rowboats and a petting zoo, and eventually started installing much larger attractions in the 80s. They've now been open for 75 years and typically receive 1.5 million visitors every single season. I first visited Drayton Manor in the summer of 2023 and then made a return visit the following year. And in this video, I'll be discussing my experiences at the park, walk through the different themed lands, discuss some of their key attractions, and hopefully give some tips if you plan to visit yourself. And before I discuss some of those key points, I feel like it's important to acknowledge the direction that Drayton Manor has been heading towards the past couple seasons. In 2020, they were acquired by the Loopings Group that owns 10 other theme parks across Europe, including Bagatelle in France, Isla Magica in Spain, Drivlet in the Netherlands, and a couple other places in the United Kingdom, as well as some zoos. And ever since that acquisition, they have taken a strong stance that they are a family theme park. Beforehand, that wasn't really the case. They were kind of caught somewhere in the middle. They had mostly family attractions, but then some more thrilling rides like their Maurer X-Car coaster G-Force, or their intimidating Intamin Drop Tower Apocalypse. Those attractions can no longer be found at the park, as Drayton Manor is now known as Drayton Manor Resort. We got a brand new logo, a state-of-the-art family coaster to replace Apocalypse. Their signature coaster Shockwave saw the removal of their stand-up trains to now feature sit-down vehicles. And all of this is done to better hone in on that target demographic and separate themselves from the other big theme parks in the area, notably Alton Towers, which is distinctly a thrill park. And even since I've been going, I feel like Drayton Manor has become a lot nicer. Sure, some of those attractions will of course be missed, but in the end, I do believe that this is a smart change, and I'm curious to see how it evolves in the future. So what does a visit to Drayton Manor Resort look like? Well, to kick things off, the park is nestled in the woods, so you have these huge tall trees all around. The on-site Drayton Manor Hotel is right within walking distance of one of the park entrances. During my most recent visit, I had the opportunity to stay there. Nothing too crazy, pretty standard hotel. It's definitely more geared towards kids with all the different references to Thomas the Tank Engine, which is actually its own dedicated land within Drayton Manor. But the convenience was very, very nice. We were able to use their side entrance to go in through the park right into their Vikings land. It's one of 4 distinct lands in the park, the others being Adventure Cove, Thomas Land, and the new Frontier Falls. One day ticket will typically range between 25 and 40 pounds for an adult, which I feel like is very reasonable for what you get. From our experiences visiting during the summertime, the park opened its doors at 10:30 and then closed at 4 p.m., which to be blunt is pretty horrendous. The UK theme parks notoriously have short operating hours, which is why I 100% encourage you to get there at park open, but not necessarily so you can just book it straight to your favorite ride, because at least during our visit, most of the rides opened at noon. So for the first hour and a half, your options are extremely limited, and then you only have 4 hours to enjoy them once they actually get them operating. I know we're definitely spoiled here in the United States with long park operating hours, but this is seriously disappointing. The only plus side I'll give it is that Drayton Manor is not a huge theme park, so I'm not going to pretend like it's impossible to get everything done during that time. If you plan well and it's not completely packed, it is very possible to get all of the key attractions done in that time, but I think even a 6 p.m. close would help and isn't that unreasonable. Now, regardless of which way you come in through Drayton Manor, the key focal point of this park is this beautiful scenic lake that you have in the center. Gives you prominent views of Stormforce 10, which is a huge water ride. You can see the Wave, formerly Shockwave, in the background. Massive swinging ship, this powered coaster. Excellent centerpiece with the different lands situated around it. So I'll start first off with Vikings because this was our first introduction to Drayton Manor. This land felt very nice and modern, which is because it is. It actually made its debut in 2022, and the best way I could describe it is it's like How to Train Your Dragon light. Well-themed buildings with several attractions harkening back to Norse mythology, such as the Thor Zamperla Disco, the Loki Zamperla Nebulas, Their powered coaster has been operating since 1987, originally as Buffalo Mountain Coaster. It was then renamed to Jormungandr to fit the Vikings theme. And that was actually a pretty good powered coaster. I like the location, stays very low to the ground, great ride for kids. The one odd point they'll bring up with this Vikings land isn't really the fault of the land itself, but more so how it's operated. You can imagine my surprise when during my last visit, we're walking through this land and there are like no guests anywhere because none of the attractions were operating. And I highly doubt it's because they're all having mechanical issues. I don't know if it was like a staff rotation that at the moment none of those attractions are open because the staff are elsewhere, but it just felt off and it was an odd sight to see at a major UK theme park in the heart of summer. If I was visiting for my first time with kids, I'd find that very disappointing that one of the 4 themed lands was essentially shut down. So I hope that isn't too much of an issue in the future, but I'll move on to Frontier Falls, located right next door. As I mentioned earlier, this is the newest themed land at Drayton Manor. Wild West areas are very common at European theme parks, so I wasn't too surprised to see that make its way here. And frankly, even though it's a bit on the smaller side, it was absolutely an improvement. After Apocalypse closed, this area was just a total dead zone. The new upgrades came to be when Drayton Manor launched their Gold Rush roller coaster, which is a very creative new attraction from Intamin that has 2 different settings. So depending on when you ride the coaster, your experience will be fundamentally different. There's actually a full separate review that goes in depth to this attraction. I highly recommend you give that a watch because I strongly believe this is the best ride at Drayton Manor, maybe the best family coaster in the entire country, and an excellent step in the right direction. Next to Gold Rush is Accelerator. This is the world's first Vekoma family boomerang. Interestingly enough, it debuted as Ben 10 Ultimate Mission back in 2011 when this section had a Cartoon Network theme. After they lost the IP in 2016, that's when it donned the Accelerator name. And it wasn't until 2024 when they had to update the theming to fit in with Frontier Falls. They went with more of a steampunk approach, which I thought was okay. In my opinion, they should have repainted the attraction to go along with it. I think that the green right now is very out of place. So we'll see if something happens with that in the future. Across from those attractions is Sheriff's Showdown. This is a shooting dark ride with some pretty good sets. Unfortunately, though, it lacks atmosphere because there's like next to no sound. I felt like it really needed music, or at least it did during my one and only experience on it. So unfortunately, when all was said and done, I found this attraction to be relatively forgettable. So if I were in charge, this is one of those rides that I would do a couple upgrades for. One more attraction we gotta highlight here, and that is The Haunting, a really cool Vekoma madhouse. This has a paranormal activity theme where you enter this manor walking down a poorly lit hallway. There's a really well done pre-show before you board the ride, which just overall exceeded my expectations. I had no idea what to expect. It's just something you gotta come out and do for yourself. So we'll move on to Adventure Cove, which has a nautical theme. Stormforce 10 is one of the most popular attractions in the park, maybe the most popular. An excellent water ride with 3 drops and a couple tricks. There's a tilted drop immediately out of the station and then a turntable at the top of the second lift so it can send the ride vehicle backwards. That drop is a soaker. If you're sitting in the back, you might get the most wet out of anyone in the boat. And then finally, there's one more drop, of course, the biggest one. This is a double down. You actually get a hint of airtime, only a little bit of a splash. The second drop is by far the worst. Across from Stormforce 10 is Maelstrom. This is an Intamin gyro swing, one of the best I've done. Really great cycle there. Next door is a wave swinger for younger riders. You then get to the wave. I experienced this attraction as Shockwave. Even though the transformation was complete during my second visit, it was unfortunately closed, so I did not get to experience the lap bar only train. But the updated surfing theming was fun, and overall I could tell that this was a positive change towards the attraction, because at the end of the day, the new train also comes with a lower height requirement, and with Drayton Manor really pushing that they're a family theme park now, I think that was necessary. And then finally, that brings us to Thomas Land, which was actually like pretty big. Probably the most attractions in the entire park. If you or a loved one is a fan of Thomas the Tank Engine, this is something you gotta check out. They have a Gerstlauer kids coaster called Troublesome Trucks, a small kid-sized log flume, plenty of spinning flat rides, and even a train that'll take you all the way back into the zoo. This land made its debut in 2008 and was a huge turning point for the park. While it's not an IP that personally interests me, I can acknowledge that the level of detail that was put into this land was really impressive. But those are the 4 themed lands of the park. I know I didn't cover every single attraction, but that gives you an idea of what to expect. The last section is that 15-acre zoo. There's over 500 animals in there, 100 different species of them. Long walking path, they'll actually take you pretty far back there. For me, I thought the zoo was just kind of okay. A lot of these exhibits are just huge cages, which makes it kind of hard to see what's in there. It just felt a little bare or plain. Definitely not my favorite, but they do have a reptile house, which I really liked. That was probably my favorite exhibit. And interestingly enough, depending on when you go to Drayton Manor, there might be some days when the zoo is the only thing that's open. This is primarily during the off season, which is actually a great way to bring in some extra traffic during the winter months. Get a discounted admission, you can see some animals, and some days they even have Thomas Land open. So a very creative way to keep people coming back all year round. But in conclusion, I enjoyed my time at Drayton Manor. It's a nice family park. It wasn't one that I probably would have made a quick return visit to had they not debuted Gold Rush. And I'm super glad I experienced it. It was definitely worth coming back for. But now that I've experienced it, I don't know if it's one that I need to return to so soon. It's not set up like a destination like a place like Alton Towers or Thorpe Park, This is much more for the locals, but it seems like management very much cares about this property and they want to continue investing in it. And that's saying a lot because frankly, Drayton Manor has seen a lot of attractions close throughout its history. They have 6 defunct coasters and a standing but not operating pirate-style boat ride in the back of the park. Things like that are less than ideal, so I look forward to seeing what new things come in the future. One attraction that I think could work pretty well that isn't out of the question necessarily is a small family wind coaster. I think about those Gravity Group family coasters, something like Kentucky Flyer, Bobcat, Timber, where there's a lot of airtime, low height requirement, and a ton of fun. I think that'd be a big hit at Drayton Manor. And 2 other parks in the chain, Isla Magica and Mer de Sable, are getting junior wind coasters from GCI. So it's not too far-fetched to think that Drayton Manor could get one too, as long as they made it different enough from Wicker Man to Alton Towers. With that park being about an hour away, they need to invest in attractions that set them apart, which is why I think that something a bit more airtime focused would actually be a nice complement. But we'll have to see. Let me know down in the comments below if you've been to Drayton Manor outside of Birmingham in England. If you agree with the points I brought up, if you think there's anything I missed, be sure to post that down below. And stay tuned for more park reviews here at Coaster Studios, and I'll see you next time.